Hello, my name is Danny Wall. I want to welcome you to our latest Eccles Alumni Forum discussion. I work here at the David Eccles School of Business. I run the master's degree in real estate, and I'm happy to have you all here with us today. I'm going to be serving as today's moderator, and joining us on our panel, we have Matt Strong. Matt is the managing partner of Sierra West Capital and the owner and broker of Conrad Cruz Real Estate Services. So welcome, Matt. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
And then joining via Zoom, we have George Morris. George is the founder and CEO of Century 21 Everest Realty Group. Welcome, George. We appreciate you joining us.
You bet.
Finally, we have the president and CEO of Inspiro Financial, Christopher Jensen. Christopher, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll dive into our discussion. There will be time for questions from the audience at the end. So if you are tuning in live, we invite you to drop those questions into the chat. We will keep track of them and get to as many of them as we can when we're finished. So let's see. Matt, I'm going to start with you since you're here on campus. Tell us about your first deal.
Oh, my first true deal, I guess, was a flip property out in Kearns, Utah. So I still remember the street, Chalet Street, also known as Leprechaun Lane. It was back at the very end of 2004, and it was just a simple flip. So since then, I've done about 450 of them. So
Wow.
That was my first one.
All right. You probably learned a lot of lessons on that first one.
Yeah, well, actually, the first one was it went so well that what convinced me to bail from the job I was in at the time and go all in. And right after that, started doing 2 or 3 more at a time. And nice little split level home, 1,700 square feet out there in Kearns.
All right, great. George, we'll jump to you next. Tell us about your first deal.
Well, my first deal was a incredible, awesome, and amazing, stunning single wide trailer. I was 21. I just turned 22 years old, and I was going to the University of Utah and decided also in the meantime to get my real estate license. So in the midst of doing that, I handed, it was actually one of the most difficult transactions ever. In fact, if that ever becomes your specialty, which is mobile homes, it actually is a mobile home. Hence, there's actual sales tax actually on the sale of that. And so oftentimes agents dabble in that. And boy, by the time it was said and done, the very first transaction I had formal complaints at the Board of Realtors. I had formal complaints at the Division of Real Estate because I had forgotten to tell, or did not even know to tell my first client ever that, by the way, there's sales tax. And even though she still closed on the transaction and she found out about it a week or 2 before, she was so upset that she reported me to wherever she could report me. And so that was my first start, where I was like, whoa, hold on a second here. Do I really for sure want to be in this real estate thing? But it's worked out, and it's been an extraordinary experience. And I started at ground zero, that was for sure. And everything from that point got better.
Great, thank you. Christopher, we'll jump to you. Tell us about your first deal.
My first deal was back in the mid 90s. I just graduated from the University of Utah and gotten into lending. This is when there was no regulation, and anybody could just throw up a shingle on the side of a door and say they wanted to lend money in mortgages. And good days. And it was just a simple little house in Holiday, Utah. And it's been a great ride and a wonderful career to be in ever since.
And I would imagine since then you've done thousands more, right?
Thousands. I don't do so much personally anymore. Companies do, but been involved personally in doing thousands and then tens of thousands as the companies I've run and managed. So yes, it's been we've been very fortunate here in Utah where we live. I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but it's a great market to be in.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to jump to forward from your from your first deal to your most recent deal, just to get a feel for what the market is like today. Matt, tell us about your most recent deal.
So one of my most recent deals was a triplex that I bought near Liberty Park at the end of last year. And my strategy with this one was to buy it and utilize what's known in kind of the real estate world, the single family real estate world, as the BRRRR strategy: to buy it, rehab it, re-rent it, refinance it, and then repeats doing a whole bunch of them, over and over and over again. But so this triplex I bought off market. It was actually on a Facebook group. So all of you out there that are still thinking there's no deals out there, there's deals everywhere. You just got to go find them and hunt them and then take action. So that triplex I bought, put about 165,000 into it, furnished it as an Airbnb. So I'm operating it as an Airbnb rental. And then I just recently refinanced it on a 30-year fixed loan. And the beauty for me why I did that is, and we maybe talk about some of these strategies, but I was able to manipulate how much cash I'm leaving into the deal because I bought it undervalued, got a much higher appraisal, and I'm leaving just a fraction of my own cash into the deal, and it's cash flowing really, really well by manipulating it, doing the Airbnb rents. So I love those kind of deals. I have a bunch of those in my portfolio, but that would be my most recent one, and it's been one of my favorites because I love going to check it out because it's just right there by Liberty Park.
Right. George, I'm going to tweak that question for you just a little bit. First, tell us about your most recent deal as an investor, and then give us a feel for the deals and the deal volume that you're seeing in your brokerage.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me just start with what you asked. So I run operations in both Utah and California. I've got a little over 1,000 real estate agents that I have stewardship for. I've been in this business coming up on nearly 30 years, and we'll close on average about 10,000 transactions. I've been the CEO of an organization. In the last decade, we've actually closed over 100,000 transactions over the last, I should say 12 years. Over the last 12 years, over 100,000 real estate transactions. And I'm very close friends, of course, with Christopher. We're in business together. So my operation controls both mortgage, title, and escrow. I was on the Senate floor just a year and a half ago, assisting a good friend of mine, Thomas Wright, with Sotheby's, who many people may know, and assisting in getting the title laws changed so that also real estate companies could own title and escrow in the state of Utah. So my organization today does well over $100 million worth of revenue. We pay out extraordinary amounts of commission. We've got multiple agents who are earning, $1 million+ incomes, both in Utah and in California, even though there is price differences in both. So from a transaction standpoint, what is interesting to me is a couple of things. One, the average American in the United States today has over $174,000 of equity in their home. There's a number of homes, not necessarily in Utah as much as other places in the country, but there's a lot of forbearances that have also gone and come about, meaning that people have been able to defer their house payments. With some current regulation and legislation that's come about is that those individuals, they say on average, have about 10% of equity in those homes that are forbeared. And also that if they sell it, they will not be restricted from being able to go get a loan and to be able to go buy another home. So the thing that I've observed in just the homes, like one of the things I'm doing right now, I have a big love affair with Washington County down in southern Utah. There's approximately 100,000 permanent residents, and it's growing literally every single day. And one of the things that you're seeing is that for me, I've made it a priority to buy any real estate that I'm buying currently in the Washington County area. For two reasons. One, the absolute guarantee of growth that's going to be happening down there, and still it has tremendous affordability. So I'm not only building a commercial building down there right now, I'm just about to close on an Airbnb, just as Mr. Strong was talking about. But my observation is that there are deals to be had, and the challenge is that it's really, and I'm certainly. We can speak to how to get those. It's not an issue. Can you do well with real estate? It's really operating and working with the proper cash flows, equity positions, capital positions, so that you don't put yourself in a very, very difficult position, especially as you're just starting out into the arena. So I love what Matt was saying, which is that he already has cash flow, which is a priority to that. So again, my investments now are commercial and residential, but I will say, I just want to mention one thing and then I'll be quiet. But real estate is if you look at it, real estate is one of the most single profitable businesses that one could operate in. And whether that be investments or whether an individual goes out and gets their license and decides to get into the business of real estate sales. Harvard recently did an article on that the entry into real estate sales is one of the most inexpensive things that an individual can do. And they were promoting it even in their own MBA programs. One, because of the outflow of cash and capitalization to become a real estate agent. But number two, because of the margins that are the largest of almost any single business that you could ever get in regards to what you earn from every single sale. So it's a very unique time with prices as high as they are. The way in which to get into real estate is very minimal and the opportunities are vast. So it's a real special time right now.
Great, thank you for that. Christopher, I'm gonna ask you the same question. Interested in hearing about deal volume in your world and your most recent investment.
Yeah, thank you. We just came off the largest financing year in the history of the United States in 2020, COVID year. There were more loans given for purchase transactions, refinance transactions ever in the history of the United States. I mean, it was a banner year. It coupled that. Those two things were because of interest rates that came down with the Fed reducing rates and driving and incentivizing people to continue to buy, and then just this demand and supply issue that we're seeing. We haven't seen this kind of appreciation in real estate really in 12 to 15 years, when we had a little bit of a depression back in the late 2000s, when most of the students were probably younger children. They may not recall that, but their parents certainly do. It was some trying times for many people. And the difference between then and now is back then that what caused that depression was lots of speculation in the market, speculative buyers getting loans with no money down, no skin in the game. And that's not the world we live in today. Today, we have great investors, like Matt, that have down payments, that are cash flowing their business. Yet we're still seeing incredible prices that are going up. When I first got in the business back in the 90s, the average home in Salt Lake County was about $140,000. Now it's 3+ times that to get a house, and you'll be lucky to find one even in that price range. So it's a fantastic market to be part of. We've seen our growth over the last few years in our association with George and his company at Everest just really take off. We're not seeing any slowdown in that. In Utah, we lend all over the country, primarily here in Utah and in Southern California, where Everest has operations. But Utah is a very unique place. It's very insulated from a lot of the effects of the country that we see on the coasts, with huge spikes and big decreases when things change. That's the result of many factors. Number one, we have one of the lowest, if not the lowest, unemployment rates in the country. Our state government is run incredibly well, so we're very fortunate to have a conservative, well-run organization there at the state level that is very pro-business. So we're seeing all kinds of influx of companies coming here, Silicon Slopes and the Lehigh area, all over Salt Lake County. This is a very pro-business state, so we have a lot of influx of people. But also Utah is the #1 creation of new households in the country. And what a new household is when two people live together, whether they're married or not. Just when two people come together and live, they're considered a household. And we are #1 in the country per capita of new households. So there's this constant demand for housing that's not going to slow down. That's going to perpetuate for a long time. So we are very, very optimistic about what's in front of us. From a personal investment standpoint, haven't done one in a while, but like George and St. George personally, in markets that are growing, that's definitely one of them. So we're all about Utah and the growth that's here, and this is an amazing, amazing business to be in. It is a little more challenging to qualify these days, particularly for a young buyer, and that's where they really want to get with someone that can help them, a professional that can guide them through that process, to make sure that they're not getting themselves in a situation where they will fail rather than succeed.
Great, thank you for that. Matt, as an investor, give us kind of the 1 or 2 most important economic indicators that you look at when you're trying to gauge the health of the market, or even looking at a specific deal.
Yeah, and some of it might depend on your strategy. If you're looking at it from a lens of, like, say, a fix and flip, which a lot of my business right now is lending, kind of doing bridge loan, hard money loans to flippers that are out there, rehabbers are buying these distressed properties, rehabbing them, and then putting them back up on the market for sale. And I think what you need to look at there is it's hard to predict the future of what values are going to be. I think values are really, really high right now. When I look at it, I almost think we'll eventually maybe get to a spot where values are like they were like a year and a half ago. I think we saw some incredible spikes in pricing because of there was hardly any inventory and there was so much demand. So people were overbidding and bidding up houses, sometimes like $100,000 over list price. So those are setting a bar for some really, really high comparables. So I think you need to be careful in not trying to predict the future, that the values are always going to be going up and up and up and up, but realistic about where you think the values might settle. Because when you're flipping a home, you got like a 3 to 6 month window that you're trying to get in and out of. So there is a little bit of risk, but there's not a ton of risk. So I would look at be as realistic as you can with how you're looking at the market. And from my perspective, don't get overly excited that you're thinking this is never going to end, that, it's going to be 4% appreciation month after month after month. And then the other thing that's going to be key is who's ever buying your house is going to need to get a loan. And if interest rates start creeping up, the affordability of what they're going to be able to buy is going to go down, which is then going to maybe lower, the pricing on the back end. So point being is look at your numbers carefully, make sure you have that margin in there, and then be very realistic about where you think that final value is going to be when you go to sell it, and then be very conscious of what interest rates are doing, because that's going to affect the bottom line payment for whoever's going to be buying your house. And then on maybe buying something to pick up as a rental, it's kind of the same thing. Look at that interest rate that you can lock into. Christopher, you'll have better answer than I will on this, but you want to probably look into something that's like a 30-year fix, where a lot of people I saw got jammed up last time was doing a lot of these 2, 3, 4, 5, or 7-year ARMs. Those are great for a low payment to begin with, but that's going to go away. And if you're not in a spot where you can refinance it, that's going to be a time bomb that's going to go off. So 30-year fixed rates, what do those look like? Compare that to the cash flow of the property, and then always weighing out with the cash you have to put down that's going to be probably locked up in that property for quite a long time.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. George, we're going to jump to you. Same thing as someone who runs a very large brokerage. What economic indicators are kind of on your daily dashboard, things that you keep track of?
Good point. And everything that Matt said, spot on. I think the thing that I've been most, where I'm looking for that black swan, that one thing that could make a significant market change. Here's some interesting indicators that I'm very close to. And to Christopher's point, how well run Utah is, just a testament to the leadership and the people that are running this state, and to the people who are residing in it. So I have offices in real estate in both Utah and California, as I mentioned. I've got some offices in North LA County. I've got Ventura County, where we'll do somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 or 4,000 transactions in this marketplace. So just give you a perspective. Out of the 4 listings that we take on average, 2 of them will go to Texas, leaving the state of California, and 1 of the 3 will always either go to Utah or to Idaho. And so the thing that has been interesting to watch, which is really this strange anomaly, is that Utah is receiving the benefit of the way in which California right now is being so poorly run. And it gets a little bit deeper to where I'm in California right now, and I'm sitting with a number of our people, and they're asking me about job possibilities and opportunities in Utah. And would we hire them there? Could they do their job in Utah? And the reason is because now it's being mandated down to every single child and kid and teenager and 3-year-old, and all these different things are, from the mask mandates to the vaccine requirements for the entire state, and even for the youth now, is making it to where there is starting. Not only was there already an exodus out of California, we're just stepping into a whole other level of exodus, because everyone thought it was going to calm down, and it's actually gotten even to a more heightened state. In fact, a year ago, people weren't thinking that it would last. And so they weren't certainly conversing with me about job opportunities in Utah versus California. So I think that if you look at inflation, which certainly we're in hyperinflation, we've got supply chain issues. We've got a thousands upon thousands, and who really at one point it was $40,000 net gain, or $40,000, sorry, not dollar, 40,000 person gain per year in Utah of the population growth. But it is far higher than that. And I think it isn't even predictable what it actually is. So when you start looking at hyperinflation, supply chains for construction, you sit down and talk to a builder, their number one concern is supply chains and can we get supplies? There's been moratoriums on cement and only certain days it can be delivered. There's been product issues, plumbing issues, electrical issues in regards to the supply chain. You're seeing, as Matt talked about, you're seeing interest rates that are rising. But the real question, because most of us all, of course, I believe, reside in the state of Utah, how does that impact? And so one of the things that I agree with Matt is, can you keep seeing this crazy type of growth of what we've seen? And the answer is, I still would arguably say I'm not sure, because Utah is this really crazy anomaly to where other poorly run states around it and people are fleeing and coming for literally for refuge into the state of Utah to be able to raise their families, have them involved in sports, not having 2 and 3 year olds with masks on, mandates in regards to vaccines, affordability and all the different factors, to where Utah still is remaining an incredibly strong state. And the argument is, well, what if rates go up, as they did just even last week, they ticked up. Well, if rates go up to 4, 5, 6%, okay, instead of there being 25 or 30, hold on, guys, sorry, apologize. I'm back. Sorry, I didn't realize a call came through. But instead of there being 25 or 30 or 40 offers on a home, now there's 5 or 10 as rates continue to climb, and that's almost in every single price range, from the $1 million+ price points to the $500,000 to $700,000 price points that are white hot in the state of Utah. So I don't necessarily see a major end in sight, but I also would move very, very cautiously. And if you're going to have a long-term hold on the pieces of real estate that you buy, and you're going to put it in the right formula, as Matt was talking about for the loan, I think you're going to be in great shape. When you talk about the depreciation, especially if it's an investment, you talk about the tax advantages, you talk about the fact if someone else is paying down the mortgage, and you talk about another number of factors and the escalation of value, real estate still holds to be an incredible opportunity in the state of Utah.
Great, thank you. Christopher, I saved maybe one of the hottest topics for last. I'm gonna maybe steer the question a little bit more, but tell us a little bit about, and especially those people who are new to real estate, how closely do you pay attention to interest rates?
Obviously, it's part of our business, so we're looking at them constantly all day long, because interest rates are a living, breathing thing, meaning they change constantly, or they can change constantly, depending on what's happening in capital markets, what's happening in the bond market, what's happening in foreign affairs. We live in a global economy these days, so everything impacts everything everywhere. So things that happen in Europe, particularly things happen in China, can influence our economy, as those dollars are invested into our economy. That can raise rates, lower rates. Inflation impacts those things. So everything impacts interest rates. Now, luckily, we've been in a 20-year period where rates have consistently kind of come down over time, to where right now, over the last year, we've had historic low rates, the lowest we've ever seen in the history of this country. Right now, rates are kind of in the low 3% range for a traditional mortgage, a little bit higher for an investor. And so it's something we look at all the time. Now, when you're investing in real estate, that definitely has an impact, because as an investor, it's going to impact your cash flow for sure. If you have a 3% rate versus a 4% rate, it may impact your ability to buy something. But it's two different things. We talk about a house that I'm going to live in and a house that I'm going to invest in. And I think for this audience, that's important to understand that from a house that I'm going to live in, you need housing. And whether rates are at 3% or 3.25% or 3.5%, you want a place to live, and preferably probably not rent. And there isn't a better thing to invest in than your home. Our state's proven that. As you can see, over the last 25, 30 years, home prices have appreciated 2, 3, 4-fold during that time. Doesn't mean it will continue to do that, but it always has been a sound investment. And the rate is important. It's important from what's your cash flow and your ability to pay, but it's not as important as putting a roof over your head and having an investment that's you're going to live in forever. So that's from your personal standpoint, but from an investor standpoint, it makes a huge difference, right? Whether you get into the market now with all-time low rates, there's lots of competition, or down the road, you've got to pay attention to that. You want to be speaking to an advisor that can help you and guide you through that process, because it's going to impact your ability to qualify and what you're able to do and what you're able to get. I'm very cautiously bullish, as George is, about the market from an investor standpoint. But again, it's apples and oranges when you're talking about a new investor, like many of these students on the call might be, versus someone like Matt that's been in the market for a long time, that's in a different economic position, because the requirements are very strenuous to get a traditional loan. As an investor, there's certain things you need to do, and you need to be very careful as you enter that market, particularly right now when we're seeing prices where they are, that you don't want to lose your shorts on something that maybe you don't quite understand. So it's still a great time. It's an amazing field to be in, but you definitely want to be careful. You want to make sure you understand the process, and you want to work with a professional that can really guide you through that process, particularly on your first 1 or 2 homes that you might invest or want to flip in. So it's 2 different things: houses you buy for an investment, and houses that you want to live in. You want to approach it a little bit differently when it comes to rates.
Okay, thank you very much. So Christopher, you brought up people who are new to this, and I think there are probably quite a few people on our webinar today who are here to learn and get some advice about how to enter this field as an investor. So Matt, what advice can you give someone who's looking to do their very first deal?
I think start understanding the market, and even at a more micro level, I always tell people, go to a neighborhood that you're already familiar with and just get super curious about that neighborhood, because ultimately what you want to do is understand value. Because once you understand what values are, then it will be a lot easier to recognize value when you see it. So, and then I even say go further and go to a neighborhood that is, say, out in Kearns or Rose Park or somewhere where most of the homes were built all at the same time. They're all similar style construction. It's so much easier to determine and nail down what the value for the neighborhood is, because there's not big swings in square footage or year built or something like that. So I always tell people, start there and get used to understanding what factors contribute to the value of a home: garages, bedroom count, square footages, age of the home. And then from there, as you get used to it, then you just start expanding and learning and networking. But so as far as getting started, I would say understand the market, get as much education as you can, network with people. And then from there, magic happens where you start going, okay, that house I know could be worth $400,000. That's listed at $300,000. That's probably a deal. But if you don't understand the market and the numbers, you won't have any clue as if you're looking to get into a deal or not. And so that's more from the hat of an investor, maybe not necessarily someone looking for their first home, is just start small. And then once you learn those skills about how to compare homes, what adds or detracts from value of a neighborhood or for a house, then you can start looking at the bigger market. And then it's just so much easier to go, oh, there's that house. That's an opportunity. I'm going to jump on it. And then once you find the right deal, the money and all the resources will always be there for you if you're asking the right questions and talking to the right people. But it all starts with that value proposition. Is the property that you have going to be worth something more, either in terms of being able to rent it or being able to do a quick turn or flip on it? So start small, go to a neighborhood, start to understand the values.
And just to add to that, the old adage, you make a lot of your money on your acquisition. So
Yep.
you have to buy right. It's hard to recover if you don't.
Yeah, and if you
So,
don't know what you're buying, you're not going to make a good purchase, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
all right. So George, let's jump to you. Same question, but I'm also going to add, in case there are people on today who are looking to get into agency and become agents. So what advice do you have for a new investor, and what advice would you have for someone who's potentially considering becoming an agent?
Yeah, great. Well, two things. One, there's the investment of real estate. And then the second component, you said, if you were to become a real estate agent, the reality is that when you're a real estate agent, and you're representing people, the reality is that it is more of a people business than anything else. In fact, I've said this for years that people will say, man, I really love brick, mortar. I love the difference between tile and travertine. And I'm home. That is irrelevant at every level if you're a real estate agent. And I say that not out of disrespect to anybody who believes otherwise, but because it is a people business. And one of the things that real estate as a business and the sense of selling has declared by the public is you see a lot of these organizations that have tried to even self-declare themselves as technology companies. Some of them really are, some of them aren't. And when I say technology in the real estate space, the real estate brokerage space, and yet what's interesting, there was a point where even in my own career, I thought, my goodness, are we going to come to a point where it's just point, click, buy, and meaning that the reality of the human touch will not even be necessary? Well, one of the things that has been really interesting is that the public has spoken. Real estate is a very, very emotional business. It's a very, very challenging business from the standpoint of the emotional psyche, human interaction, and all the different dynamics that happen around the fact of whether it be investments or in people buying their first home or their second home or whatever it may be. And the public has spoken that they want a human being involved. So oftentimes what I've seen from so many agents is they may have a client who actually finds the home, knows the home they want to buy. Then they call the agent and say, okay, now could you please still help me write it up and make sure I get through the finish line? And it's been a very interesting observation that I remember when I was first in the business, someone came to me and said, oh my gosh, well intended to, what if the rates go up? What are you going to do? I'm like, gosh, I was 22. I'm not quite sure. But what I've realized, and I think, all of us, especially Matt and Christopher, have been in the game of real estate for so long. And this sounds a little morbid, but this is the one observation I've had over these many years. And it took me a few months to get past this very meaningful conversation that someone had with me when I was 22, when they said, well, George, what are you going to do if rates go up? Well, I thought that maybe I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't be able to sell real estate. But here's the reality. People are unfortunately always getting divorced. People are always getting job transfers. People are always losing their jobs. People are there's deaths in family, there's estate sales, there's first-time home buyers. And even in 2008, when the market was at its worst, the worst market in the last 100 years, the government still stepped forward and said, whoa, time out. We've got to have home sales. That's the engine to our economy. That's the engine to our well-being. And they said, guess what we're going to do? We're going to pay you $8,000. If you haven't bought a new home or bought a home in the last 3 years, we're going to pay you $8,000 to buy a home. So one thing I've recognized, no matter what the business, the market is or the economy is doing, there's markets that are sellers markets. Sometimes there are buyers market, but the reality is there's always sales that are going on. So to believe that, sometimes people say, gosh, I want the security of having a job that I get paid with every single day. Well, that's one element. But I realized early on when I was 22 years old and I got fired from a job working at, if any of you remember, ZCMI, I got fired. All of a sudden, the light bulb went on. I would really like to be in a position where no one can ever fire me. And so for me, my entrepreneurial spirit took over and said, you know what, enough. And I'm not the guy who just sold, has a company with lots of agents. I was a guy that in my late 20s was selling 100 homes a year, making $1 million incomes, because I recognized that this business was about discipline. It was about the right mindset. It was about the right skill sets of communication, which are all things that anyone who has a deep desire and hunger can learn. So I just go back to the fact of, man, if you want to be in this business of real estate, there's two elements to it. And then just one last counsel. I would just say this. It's the same counsel I give my own kids. I've got a 25-year-old son-in-law and a 25-year-old daughter. They're married. And every single time I'm kind of just pounding my fist, buy one property a year for the next 15 years, and you will be set for the rest of your life. So again, if you're going to long-term hold, you buy one property a year, keep doing whatever you love doing, buy one property a year, like Matt talked about, buy it in the best formula that you can, but buy one. Don't need to buy 10, don't need to buy 20, don't know to be just one for the next 15 years, 15 properties, basically they're at 50% loan to values or paid off, you will be set for the rest of your life. And most of you are probably in your mid 20s. By age 40, if you chose to, complete retirement, sitting back, cashing the checks, and having an extraordinary life of peace and an absolute certainty that you know you're going to be okay.
It's great advice. Thank you. Appreciate that. Christopher,
Yeah.
I'm going to customize the question a little bit. Similar question on advice, but if someone came into your shop today and was looking to close on their first investment deal, but came to you for advice, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, I would echo everything that Matt and George have said. It's sound advice and should be heeded. That counsel, it's perfect and spot on. Obviously, we're more from the finance side, right? Unless you're independently wealthy, which maybe some of the students are, or have parents or grandparents willing to give them a bunch of money, you're going to need to get a loan, right, to buy a house, and that's where sometimes it can be challenging. You can do all the diligence in the world and have all the right motivation, but unless you can qualify for a loan, it really doesn't matter. And so whenever we talk to young folks or anyone that's getting interested in wanting to invest in real estate, we often advise them, hey, you need to sit down with a mortgage professional first, because you don't want to waste your time until you know that from a financial perspective, you can actually buy the house that you did all this due diligence on to find. And so we sit down and we kind of talk about three things that they really need to focus on so they can't put themselves in a position to buy that home, that investment property, or their forever home or their first home, or whatever it is, so that they make sure that they get the best financing terms possible. And the three things that are, their credit, their income, and their assets. Number one, you got to have credit and good credit to be able to qualify these days. Particularly as an investor, you need to have excellent credit to get a traditional loan. That's maybe different than some bridge loans that Matt focuses on, or some alternative type of financing. But for a traditional loan, you need to have solid, really good credit. And for most young people, they don't even know what that means. What does good credit mean? What do I have to have to give credit? What does it look like? How long do I need to get it? What kind of accounts do I need to open? How can I manage it? There's a process. There's a little bit of a game. You have to understand the rules of that game to make sure you optimize your credit. So we're going to review credit number one, and that could take them a year or 2 or 3 to get their credit in a position where they would even qualify, depending on their age. So that's number one. Number two is their income. You've got to be able to have income that can support this loan, whether it's the house you're going to live in or it's an investment property that still may cash flow. You still have to be able to qualify to make sure that it does cash flow. And the kind of income you need just depends on your situation, the amount of property that you buy. And that means you got to have a job, whether you're self-employed for 2 years or you have a W-2 earning job with a company. You need to be employed. You have to have income to be able to qualify for any type of a mortgage loan. And number three is the assets of the down payment that you're going to need. There really are no zero down payment options in the investment world. There are for your primary residence. But typically people need to put at least 3 to 5% on their primary residence. But as an investor, to get a traditional loan, you need to put 20 to 25% down of that purchase price. So if you're buying, a $200,000 or $300,000 house, we're talking about $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 you need to save. So those are some barriers to entry for some of these people that are trying to become investors, where Matt can help in some of their options that are there. But those are the three things that people need to understand when they're getting into any kind of financing, whether it's their own home or an investment property. Their income, their assets, and their credit are critical, and you've got to make sure you understand those so they're in a position that will allow you to buy the house when you find it.
Great. Thank you. And let's jump real quick. I'm going to ask each of you to get out and dust off your crystal ball. And I actually threw mine in the trash because I get students ask me every semester about what the outlook of the economy is going to be. And for years I have been wrong. This market, this recovery cycle, it's been very hot for much longer than I thought it would be. And I think most of us probably fall in that boat. But Matt, get out your crystal ball and tell us what you think the next 1 to 3 years look like.
Well, I know you kind of wanted a one-word answer, but I would quickly say, listen and re-listen to what George said a little earlier about just buying one at a time. Because one answer is it does not matter if you're a long-term buy and hold. Who cares? Just don't realize the loss if the market does happen to dip. Because as long as people keep having babies, population increases, there will always be a demand for a house over your head or for a renter that needs a home. But if I were to predict quick, I would maybe see it like kind of a plane landing. We're looking out over, the airport. I don't see it being, but I do see an adjustment coming for sure. But that may just be off the peaks like I talked about. If interest rates stay low, things are going to keep cruising along.
Okay. George, we'll jump to you. Same thing in just a couple minutes.
Okay. Just my main thing to what Matt said is that long term, I'm pausing here for a second here. This is my big thing. If the market changes radically, it will be because of job loss and job growth. And if people are employed and people can continue to be employed and job creation continues, if we're specifically talking about Utah, I think you're going to see a continual rise. Most of what I either read, study, when I speak to different, there's so many people that believe the ride for Utah specifically, although it may not be as extreme, maybe it might flatten a little bit, might not be so hockey sticked up, but the conversation is it could go as long as 10 years, which is crazy to even think of that's even possible. But even with the rising rates, because of the creation of families, households, people not moving out of the state, so many people coming into the state, there's already a housing shortage in the state of Utah that we can't even contain it. I mean, just to give you perspective, guys, the last offer just even a month ago in St. George on new construction, desert color, great development right by the airport, 129 offers still only a month ago on this one property. And so it's property that I wanted. And so I took it because I'm doing a long-term hold and it's a nightly rental Airbnb type of situation. So it's tough to say because it depends, I believe, on job growth and job creation and whether people are employed. But if people are employed and people keep funneling into the state, I think it's going to go on for a while. If that stops, then I think it'll stop literally on a dime. And you should be very, very well prepared from the standpoint of either whether it be cash savings, cash setting aside, making sure your taxes are in control, and then of course making sure that you're reducing your liabilities and expenses.
And George, I'm going to second what you just said. I think the most important indicator I look at in the real estate economy is job growth.
Yeah.
And I think job growth is what drives the real estate economy, both on the residential and the commercial side. So
exactly.
Christopher, let's jump to you. Same question. In 1 to 3 years, what do you think this market looks like?
I have similar outlook as these two gentlemen. I think we'll probably see a little bit of a correction in the sense that, listen, the economy is always doing this, always has, always will. It's just how big are these spikes and valleys that impact what we're doing. And we're definitely in a unique situation that we don't have such severe peaks and valleys as other parts of the country. I don't see things necessarily over the next 1 to 3 years. I don't see things maybe slowing down a little bit, but I don't see things slowing down to the point where we're seeing a depreciation in values at all because of all the economic indicators we've talked about. Interest rates will likely continue to go up a little bit. We've got to curtail inflation. The federal government's not buying as many bonds as they used to. They've talked about they're not going to do that. That's going to naturally lead to interest rates going up. Now, what does that mean? The first house I bought was at 10.5%. Today, they're at 3%. So even if rates went up to 4%, big deal, right? And they likely will, right now, as I mentioned, they're in the low threes. They likely will get up into the mid to high threes here in that time period that you talked about. But like all things, there are things that we just can't predict. No one could have predicted 9/11. No one saw COVID coming. All these things that happen that we have no control over are going to happen, right? In the future, that's just the nature of the beast of living on this earth. Those things are going to happen. But I will say our ability to handle those things as a country and as a state is vastly better than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago, particularly after the last housing crash. There are so many more protections in place within the federal government now to help curtail the economy and make sure things plug along, and so we don't have these big spikes and valleys like we have in the past. So I definitely see kind of not a this, but kind of a this over the next little bit, the next 3 years. And it's still a great time to get in and an amazing time to invest, despite the fact we'll probably see a little bit of increase in rates.
All right.
Hey, Danny, can I just add one thing to Christopher, what Christopher said? Will that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, just one of the things to consider is that, they've talked about rates going up to, let's just say 5-6%. Frankly, that could happen even this fall. I mean, here it's going to be extended, but let's just say somewhere in the next 18 months, let's say it gets up to rates where they're 5-6+% right in there. The argument is that there's going to be a little bit of a trough, a little bit of a slowdown, even specific to Utah, that might range in between just 2 or 3 months. And all it is more of a pricing correction. And so there's two components to this. There's the pricing, right? The elevation of pricing going up, but then does that really slow down the home sales process? And the reality is that because there is still, which is crazy to say this, but from 08, 09, 10, 11 until 2012, there continued to be basically nominal amounts of homes being built. On across the country. So there's no matter what, there is a massive housing shortage. So even if rates go up and prices drop, homes will still be moving along. So again, I go back to, gosh, if you're looking at like, what would real estate look like as a profession, man, I don't know if there could ever have been and ever could be a better time in regards to being involved in selling real estate, because although the price may come down, it's not going to prevent the fact that homes are going to be sold, because we are still in such a ruthless shortage of homes. And you're seeing that by what you're seeing by people, what they're collecting on rents. Long-term holds on rentals are crazy good. And it's not going to continue to, I don't think it's going to change for a long time, because there's such a shortage of housing.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we're going to jump to a couple audience questions. Matt, this first one I think is best suited for you. What impacts do you think technology is going to have on real estate investing and specifically home flipping in the next 5 or 10 years?
It's going to make it easier to maybe analyze properties, to maybe manage some of the data in your processes and systems. But at the end of the day, if you can't execute on the deal, it doesn't matter how great the technology is. Technology is not going to come in and do the tile for you, or do the carpet, or analyze the scope of work. Now, it's going to certainly make it easier to analyze the before and after the process, maybe your systems of paying people, moving quickly. Certainly technology has helped me a ton to do a lot more with a lot less, but you still got to know the values. You got to be comfortable with those. You got to understand the fundamentals, and then you've got to execute. You've got to execute. And technology is, as far as like, say, a rehab or like a long-term hold, it might help get tenants in quicker, or, speed up the process of managing a rental or something like that, or provide some more transparency there. But if you can't execute, then you're still out of luck, no matter how great the technology is. It's certainly going to help. It's going to be awesome. And it has helped and be awesome from all standpoints. I'm working on some new tech right now that's going to help the commercial loan application process, but all that will do is just allow people to run quicker and move faster, but you still got to analyze the deal. You still got to use your brain to make sure you're positioned right in whatever transaction you're doing.
And I'll add, George mentioned this earlier, but I think as long as people occupy real estate, it will be a people-oriented
100%.
business. I think it always will be. Technology will make us more efficient.
Yep.
But I think you still have to have those skills.
Well, and some technology is, maybe like, say, Zillow or something. People, especially out of state, rely on Zillow all the time. They're always talking about Zillow, but Zillow's not super accurate or up to date with what the market is. And Zillow doesn't know that home backs 7th East, and 7th East is a busy road, and the neighbor next door is, garbage. Like, you still have to, you still have to get out, drive it, feel it, touch it, experience it.
Right. All right. So Matt, this one might be for you as well, but I'm gonna throw it George's way. I think this is probably from a first-time home buyer or potentially a first-time investor. How do you find deals and compete with buyers coming from out of state that have more cash and are paying over asking price? So George, what do you think?
Actually, it's something I'm dealing with so much, because you have so many of these real estate agents, right, that are representing individuals in regards to being able to buy. What I can say is that you're starting to see a slowdown of that. and you're starting to see some things that are happening. But I will tell you that we needed to look for a solution to that, and we actually have found one. But basically, in so many words, it's an organization, a company that we have that will go in and buy that home, and then it turns it literally they're able to go into the offer where they're buying the home for cash, and then being able to then go back and 6 months or 12 months later being able to refinance it because of the dynamics of what you're talking about. And depending on the rental amount is always dependent upon how much of a lease option people put down. So there's no question that has to be dealt with because of the cash that is so available in today's marketplace. But I would say the second component is that you started to see a little bit of a slowing of that. You're not seeing as much of that today. You're not seeing that it has to be cash on every single offer. So that's actually been probably one of the more, happy moments of the market right now, to where the first time home buyers are starting to be able to now come in and be able to buy, and to be able to buy in a normal fashion with a normal closing period. And so I don't think that is as big of a problem as it has been for, frankly, the last 18 months. If you take the last 2 or 3 months, you can say that that has changed radically and is a lot better off. But if you need a solution, happy to provide and help in that. And people can reach out to myself or Christopher, who have access to dealing with that, so that one can walk through the market as a cash buyer. Although there's a delayed ownership, they still get the benefits of all the equity and the rise in equity. It's a pretty phenomenal program that we've put together.
I actually heard of that. It's pretty innovative.
Yeah.
Matt, I'm going to jump to you and then jump back to Christopher. How are you finding deals right now? Just throw out some ideas in this really tight market.
The MLS, there's still deals on the MLS. There's lots of deals on the MLS. There's a whole, I wouldn't say underground, but there's this whole investor network where, you see the bandit signs, we buy ugly houses, stuff like that. There's a whole network of those guys that are just bombarding homeowners.
Yeah, I get called weekly. And technology's helped increase, the speed of which people are getting after homeowners. But so there's, then there's, like I said, my triplex was in a Facebook group. So there's deals everywhere, but low hanging fruit is the MLS. For sale by owners. Then there's these maybe specialized investor networks that are always passing deals back and forth that are generally always off market. Okay. All right, Christopher, last question for you. So this is from the audience. With historically low interest rates, what motivates lenders to lend money for almost no return when they could put their money into stocks or other investments with a much better return? So maybe you could explain a little bit how lenders make money.
Sure. I mean, it's a risk reward issue, right? Investors on a big scale, the hedge side of things, or capital investment companies, or asset management companies, they're going to move their money where the risk is the least of the greatest return. And they're always comparing that based on what the stock market's doing versus what bond market's doing versus what the housing market's doing. As a mortgage company, as a mortgage bank, a direct lender, that's all we do, right? We don't take our money and put it in stocks. We don't take and put our money in other types of financial instruments. This is our business, is to lend money. And so it doesn't really matter for us, it doesn't really matter whether rates are 2% or 10%. We make money the same way, because we make money when we package loans together, pool them together, and sell them in the capital markets, which is on Wall Street. We get paid for that process. The end investor on Wall Street, they're the ones that make the return of whether rates are 2.5% or 10%. And they're the ones that are going to make that decision of whether they're going to buy mortgage-backed securities, what we call them, or if they're going to put their money in stocks or bonds or whatever. So as a lending company, rates have no impact on how much money we could potentially make. High, low, we're going to make the same kind of margins on the things that we do. The government stimulates the housing economy because they want to make sure housing is there. But it's really those big, huge entities that have billions of dollars that are investing on Wall Street. They're the ones that kind of decide where they're going to place their money. And that doesn't have a huge impact on the small day-to-day investor, other than it can indicate and drive rates one way or the other based on what they do. So it's a complicated process, but that's as simplified as we can give it to before we get too deep into it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. That is actually the last question we have time for. We're going to wrap up. We want to thank everybody for tuning in and participating in our discussion. In particular, I'd like to thank Matt, George, and Christopher for sharing generously, I will say, knowledge that you hopefully found helpful. If you're interested in learning more about the Eccles Alumni Network or the Master of Real Estate Development Program here at the David Eccles School of Business, you can hit our website at eccles.utah.edu. But thanks again for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Go Utes.
That's right.